you. I'm delighted and honored to be here, and I look forward to our discussion in this session. The questions that you asked me for your magazine are very scholarly and on point. Not only do they touch on the academic aspects of philosophy, ethics, the future through the lens of transhumanism, but also they're applicable to mainstream questions and concerns. So I truly value your broad yet finessed approach.
So let's start with this very obvious, important question. What is transhumanism?
Transhumanism is a philosophy and worldview. It started as a philosophical approach to looking at human futures. What is the potential of humanity at the intersection of advancing and exponential technologies, as well as the sciences that are changing not only our understanding of our own genomics. Transhumanist philosophy looks at this through the dynamics of a philosophical perspective, which, as you know, philosophy is based on the questioning and the knowledge of existence. As a worldview, transhumanism is a practice as well as a philosophy. As a practice, it's how we live our lives, not only in preventing the onslaught of diseases and living a healthy, meaningful life, but also how we treat other people. A large part of transhumanism is to be psychologically aware of our worldview and a mindfulness about the environment in which we exist, because, and this is very fundamental, not everyone will agree with the transhumanist perspective. Now, what's interesting there, and I think that your listeners would really appreciate this, to be forthright, we didn't agree on the, let's say, the basic practices of transhumanism, where we all did agree on the basic tenets. None of us from the very beginning, Max, myself, nor FM, ever saw it as a political movement or as an economic movement or a religious or spiritual movement. Those were always secondary adjuncts to the basis of the philosophy. The reason why the three of us came together from our different backgrounds, FM 2030 was a diplomat, he was with the United Nations, he was a futurist. He moved into the area of futurology and taught at the New School of Social Research in New York City. I started out as a fine artist and performer, and I was in the film industry, and I had a TV show, and I was always talking about the future of the human body and our brain and looking at the poetry or the narrative of storytelling within that future human. And Max was a scholar from Oxford University, where his degree area was in philosophy, economics, and looking at the structure of the future in that way. So while Max and I are both doctors, PhDs, FM was not an academic, although he taught. So you have these different backgrounds that came together, and that's the beauty of the very formation of the movement of transhumanism, that it wasn't one particular dogmatic way of looking at the world or the future of humanity. We were diverse in looking at it, and we all agreed that the fundamental core of transhumanism as a philosophy and as a practice is longevity, healthy life extension, and to see all people be benefited through the sciences and technologies.
Well, we want to know how you, in particular, got involved with the transhumanist movement.
That's really great. Okay, so as a woman, I grew up in the 1950s and 60s, and women very seldom were given positions of leadership. And I remember in high school, I was president of my sorority. I was voted most likely to succeed. And in university, I was always trying to accomplish and achieve. I was extremely ambitious. And I wasn't recognized for that because the male students were awarded. And even my father, who was a New York advertising executive, said to me, "You're doing twice the work as that guy over there. Why is he making the same grade you're making?" So it was very evident. I remember when I left the Episcopalian Church, I stood up, and this is again as a teenager, I stood up and I thought, I'm not going to have another person telling me how to think or what to do that doesn't understand myself. I was never a totally healthy child. I grew up with certain diseases. There's a certain discrimination about people who are paraplegic or quadriplegic or have multiple sclerosis or ALS, or have mental illnesses, schizophrenia or bipolar. These are the driving forces for me as an individual to go, something's not right here. The way we look at people is not humanitarian, it's biased. I remember I was extremely ill in 1980, and I was performing in Japan, and I was scheduled to go to Switzerland as a performer and then to the Paris Arts Festival. And I got sick in Japan and I couldn't go. I almost died. I recovered from it, thank goodness. But when I got back to the United States, I thought about that long and hard. And what was most prevalent to me was that, why didn't I know I was so sick? Why was I on the operating table with the Japanese surgeon saying to me, you may not live? And the translator is saying, you know, if you don't let go, you're going to die. So when you get to that point, you're going, wait a minute, that's a reality. I'm telling stories that are very poetic and romantic and lovely, but it's not dealing at the truth of what's going on with humanity. And I did a major shift in my life. I started studying technology. I would attend conferences, just sitting in the back of the room. I met with these individuals and they influenced me remarkably about looking at the future and how to change your mindset to ask certain questions that will help you better understand the trajectory and the enculturization of ideas. So all of that caused me to pause, and I changed my career, and I left being a fine artist performer at that time, and I started thinking about design and strategic design more as a futurist and looking at some of the consequences we face. So that was the core source for me in becoming interested in this. And through that, I started writing more and doing more design work, thinking about the future of the human body. I created a television show on cable TV called Trans-Century Update, which had many experts in the fields of automation, robotics, nanotechnology, artificial intelligence, longevity, life extension, looking at electronic cars, electric cars, solar energy, space exploration. And at that time also I went to space camp, the first pre-astronauts training at the United States Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama. And I did the pre-training, which I loved, had a fantastic time. And I wrote the Transhuman Manifesto, and all these things started crystallizing for me. And then I devoted my life to looking at what the future of the human would be if we could be more compassionate, if we could be kinder, more aware people outside of political and religious dogma, but put transhumanist agenda first and then choose your other signifiers. And at that time, I met FM 2030. I met him in 1982. I wrote the manifesto in 1983. My TV show was from 1985 to 1993, I think it was. And FM and I put on several projects. He was teaching at UCLA, courses on transhuman and the future of the human. And I went in, I lectured at his courses. We put on a number of events in Los Angeles on cryonics and looking at longevity, life extension. All this was in the early 1980s up until, you know, the late 1990s. And in 1991, I guess it was, I met Max Moore.
Your 2018 book, Transhumanism, What Is It?, is valued as an important resource which provides answers to some of the basic questions about the philosophical, ethical, and cultural worldview of transhumanism. Briefly talk us through what your motivations were for writing that book.
Oh, good question. I wrote that book because what I realized is after co-authoring and co-editing the Transhumanist Reader, which is the first academic book on transhumanism, that book is really consequential. But what I learned that was published in, I think, 2012 or 2013, and here we are in 2020. I wrote Transhumanism, What Is It?, in 2018, I think it was. What I realized in that time frame between the first book, which is very dense and rich in ideas from the original thinkers, was that people weren't getting it. It was maybe too highbrow, maybe it was too academic, maybe it was too dense. And I thought we need a very quick read, a short book, something that's just going to nail it. Just say what it is, what it's not, what are the core ideas, how do they manifest, what can people do, what organizations can people join, etc. So that was the motivation behind my putting together a short, small book, Transhumanism, What Is It? It's to fill that gap. And what I'm still finding is I didn't succeed, obviously, because people are still getting so much misinformation. I do a lot of interviews and give a lot of talks, and I'll go to a conference and there's other speakers speaking about transhumanism, and they're talking about something and I'm going, where did you get that? And a philosophy is more ardent and more focused on finding the core of ideas and where ideas come from and building them out and like codifying them, you could say. Whereas politics tends to skew things. And you don't ever think of, at least I don't know many people do, when you're talking about politics, go, oh, that's the truth. They're after the truth. They're, they're honest, integrity, soul searching, field. No, politics we usually think of as being coercive as far as manipulating, using a lot of advertising or marketing to sway people's beliefs, a lot of exaggeration, hyperbole, and accusation. Well, that's how it is. That is not what politics is supposed to be. But let's just say that it's kind of slanted in that way. So I wouldn't go to politics to find truth or evidence. I would go more to philosophy or anthropology. And in philosophy and anthropology, no one gains from creating falsehoods. You gain from doing, the deep dive into knowledge. And that's why philosophy is so important. And why I think that it's really best if any of the political and or religious transhumanist groups really focused on the core philosophy, what's written in the philosophy and in the Transhumanist Manifesto that I wrote, to build off of that. First, it's unethical. Number two, it's not a very nice thing to do. And number three, it shows insecurity. If you have to take something that's already out there, that's already been published and written, and the hard work of those people who did that, and you have to pretend that they didn't do it and say, oh, I created the transhumanists, this or that, then there's something wrong. And then it goes into the area of psychology, and we talked about this earlier in your interview. Transhumanism is not just about life extension or a human body or augmenting the body or enhancing the body. It's also about our cognitive properties and our sense of self, our purposefulness and our level of integrity, self-ownership, self-responsibility. So I think that we really need to get to the core of this and respect the original ideas, build off of them to be sure, but don't try to reinvent the wheel.
Very interesting. Thank you. Now let's talk about leadership, transhumanist leadership, and some of the challenges that come with it. Natasha, you have been a key thinker and leader of spearheading the development of the philosophy and movement of transhumanism for several decades. Can you briefly share with us your experience and challenges at the front lines of this unique and radical idea and movement?
Oh, that's a really important question to ask, because so many times we look at the prettiness of something, or the high shine, glossiness of it, and forget to look at what was behind the scenes in the trenches. Well, having been in the trenches of transhumanism, I know the difficulties that we went through. In the 1980s, for example, when the term transhuman was starting to become a more public, not the philosophy, just the term transhuman, and that was done through FM 2030, that no one kind of understood it. It was more like a futurist concept of the future human. The term transhuman was used more widely than the term cyborg, which tends to be used widely today and incorrectly. When people refer to cyborg, it's actually a transhuman that they're referring to. But putting that aside, through the 1980s, it was okay. We were so far ahead of mainstream that we weren't targeted. However, in the 1990s, when people started waking up and AI started coming out of its long winter, in 1991, Extraby Institute started the first email list on the internet to talk about the future and technology and science. life extension, robotics, automation, encryption, blockchain, singularity started on the the XRP list. And all the heavy thinkers were on it. We had a great time. When people got a wave of this, they started interviewing us and asking us about the future of the human, what about genetic engineering? So at first it was exciting, and then the naysayers came in. Oh, genetic engineering is going to ruin human. We'll lose the essence of what it means to be human, that particular X factor. All of a sudden, all these journalists came out of the woodwork. Then they said, you must hate your body if you support gene therapy. What? Anything from the truth. We love our human bodies, but we wanted to longer life and healthier life and to enhance the performance. So the main thing in the 1990s was genetic engineering and how we were supporting eugenics. And we never even used the term eugenics. We used maybe the phrase morphological freedom or something else like that. But it was really a launching at us, an attack of us. I remember I was on the cover of the LA Weekly magazine. Well, little did I know that journalist who was pretending he was interested in my ideas was actually being inauthentic. I was giving a talk at MGM on the future, and I was showing my future body design, prima post-human, and it was like just a basic design of a body. He had written that I was showing my naked body, and I'm going, what? Slowly but surely things came around, and then the ideas became mainstream. And then when we reached the 21st century, we put on a conference. In 2004, it was the first online virtual conference. And Ray Kurzweil, Andrew Sandberg, Max, myself, Martine Rothblatt, Eric, I don't think Eric Drexler was, but Robin Hansen, we were all keynotes, and we came up with a solution to one of the biggest issues with that genetic engineering anti-transhumanist sentiment, which was with President George W. Bush's Bioethics Commission or Committee. And it was Francis Fukuyama, Leon Kass, et cetera. And they were saying transhumanism is the world's most dangerous idea, and that genetic engineering would destroy the human race. And so we responded to that. And it was published, and it became known as the Proactionary Principle.
For now, let's look at Humanity Plus. Humanity Plus as an organization. This is an international organization which many of us have come to know as serving as that driving force behind the idea of transhumanism worldwide. Tell us a little, please, about your work, particularly at Humanity Plus.
Okay, thank you. I take great value and pleasure in that our board and our members are smart enough to be able to say, hey, we need to pay attention to this here because there's something wrong there. So let's all take a look at it and do our research and find out. It's just information that we want people to become smarter, more aware, more knowledgeable about longevity, genetics, nanotechnology, AI, etc.
Now let's come to an idea which I believe is very dear to your heart and also closely related to transhumanism. I'm talking about radical life extension, right? We follow some of your work. We are aware of how you were very instrumental to the launching of RadFest. But then some of us still want to know from your own standpoint as a role model of super longevity, what really is radical life extension? How do you define it?
It's outside the norm. It's outside the expected. And the measures that we take to preserve our lifespan, to protect our lifespan, and to slow down the onslaught of aging and disease is radical to the norm. So radical life extension just worked for me.
Now, something paramount that I keep coming across in your work, as a paramount concern, your work, has been this notion of the ethical use of technology. Now, can you elaborate on why this approach is important and what significance it has on the vision of human enhancement?
It behooves all of us that it's known that the transhumanist perspective is to employ ethics, especially now with machine learning like artificial intelligence. Very important to take a look at that. And this ties into your question. We're seeing this flurry of people going into the area of machine ethics, learn about strong AI and machine learning, and if and when it becomes smarter than the human and its processing power far exceeds human cognitive processing power, what will we do? We'll no longer be the most intelligent form in existence. And that is a serious worry, and we want that to be self-actualized, to be sure. But we have our head in our sands to think that we can do that. And our head in the sand doesn't help anyone. And interesting that Elon Musk, who was truly opposed to advancing artificial intelligence, now has a company called Neuralink, and Neuralink is looking at augmenting the brain. Well, it's interesting because that idea of Neuralink and the tertiary brain ties into my seminal work with the primo post-human future body design, which had a metabrain attachment, which is a tertiary brain, and form this metabrain to a third brain that would have more processing power, more intelligence, more error correction devices, and increase memory capability or storage, and upload it and cross-load it and download it. So, but now there's a shift. Elon Musk, if he's creating Neuralink, and when you listen to him, his terminology, his language is so transhumanist. So we're seeing that even those naysayers who are saying we must stop AI have shifted to where they're saying the ethical use of technology must be spoken of, but we are not in control of it.
For the sake of listeners, can you please explain to us what is the proactionary principle and how has it helped transhumanism and life extension advocacy since its formulation?
Proactionary principle looks for a balanced approach to determining the pros and cons of any new technology and or existing technology. Prior to the proactionary principle, most people, decision-making organizations and groups relied on the precautionary principle. The precautionary principle started out as a way to determine the pros and cons of a new technology. So it means precautionary, to be cautious about it, which is a good thing. However, the precautionary principle placed 100% burden of proof on the new technology, so that if the new technology had any, science or technology, or let's say innovation, had any error or possible error, then no good. So that's really an imbalanced approach to innovation. We know that there is no science, no technology, nothing in the universe that is 100% foolproof. That there's always a possibility or a chance for a problem to ensue, whether you understand it prior or it is something that comes from left field. The issue then becomes, how do we deal with problems? So with that in mind, the proactionary principle says that let's balance all sides of the story. Let's look at the new innovation, the new science or technology, etc., as well as the existing science or technology, and balance them out, see which one has the most pros and the most cons. It could very well be that the status quo or the science or technology that is already in existence has more problems to it or is more problematic than the newer one, which could have a few problems. But the newer one would not be accepted because it could have a few problems. So we stay with the old one that has a lot of problems. So the proactionary principle addresses that by saying we need to take a balanced approach to look at all sides of the new or the novel or the innovation, science or technology, as well as the old. I hope that answered your question.
All right, so let's talk about the Transhumanist Declaration, a very monumental and significant document in the history and trajectory of transhumanism. Now, Natasha, you were one of the minds which originally crafted and signed the Transhumanist Declaration, a document which later was adopted by the Humanity Plus Board in 2009. Can you talk us through the idea, ideals, and spirit of that declaration?
Sure. Yeah. The the directive behind it, the reason behind it was that there were a lot of transhumanists who weren't necessarily members of any one organization. And at that time, there were a couple of organizations. There was Aleph in Sweden that Anders Sandberg started after XP Institute, started by Max Moore and Tom Morrow in 1991. There was TransCito, which started in Dutch, the Netherlands. So there were different transhumanist associations around the world. We were very small, mind you, not in the hundreds of thousands like we are today, but the hundreds of people. So we wanted, the philosophy was understood. That was never an issue with the philosophy, but we wanted to have a declaration that we all agreed on that would be a practice. So it would tie into the practice or the practical approach of transhumanism and the Transhumanist Manifesto. So I think the Transhumanist Manifesto certainly precedes the Transhumanist Declaration, but the Transhumanist Manifesto was just written by me. So I like that the declaration had a group of authors, that it was co-authored.
Can we get some account from you on how much effort the organization has made and is still making to extend its reach and impact globally?
For our last summit, over 3,500 people live streaming in attendance. So that is really quite phenomenal, 3,500 people. That is the broadest reach we've ever had with any conference or summit. And the reason for that is because we had an incredible team. I produced and hosted, but I couldn't do that without the extraordinary technical team from Singularity Net, which is Ben Gertzfel's company. His team there, all of them working tooth and nail in streamlining our technology so it would be top notch. And those videos are available on YouTube at Humanity Plus's YouTube channel. So if anyone wants to see them. The summit was based on beyond mortality, beyond scarcity, and beyond cruelty. So we looked at COVID-19 and some of the issues that have come to fruition, such as the vulnerability of the human body. So that's the main thing is through our summit. And we will be putting on another one about machine learning and not just narrow AI, but strong AI or AGI, and the issue of what are we going to do next? And I think those are very big questions and a deep dive that the public will truly enjoy.
Natasha, you have very wonderful ideas, and if you must know, you are quite an inspiration to many of us. The founder and president of Transdisciplinary Agora for Future Discussions, TAFT, just so you know, would like to communicate to you that your idea of ethical use of technology really inspired him when he set out to build TAFTs. So just as part of how far-reaching some of your ideas have reached, and we wish you continue to inspire more of us in the work we do. Now, TAFTs as an organization, we would also like to hear from you how some of these ideas of yours and some of your experiences in organizing conferences, events, and other programs to push transhumanism forward. What kind of lessons can TAFTs learn from you, from your ideas, and from your experiences in pursuing the project that the organization seeks to accomplish?
Be mindful of who your members are. Encourage people to join, encourage people to read and to learn and pay attention. You team up with another organization. For example, here's my offering to you. If you want to co-sponsor our next summit, you could do it without spending money. You can do it by helping us promote it perhaps, and then you have your name as a co-sponsor. That brings our members to more awareness of what you're doing. So I think that's really important to get involved with organizations and to, if you don't have the money, then sponsor in some other ways. Roll up your shirt sleeves and get in there and help get your publications out there. Not just in academics, but in the mainstream. And I think that through your interviewing me, you've already done that. And I think that's very impressive. I watched you grow over the years. And I think that you've really carved your presence in a delightful way. And I think that people will recognize you all for that. Being too ambitious kind of is not the way to go, but slow and steady and making sure that you have authenticity and integrity always wins out in the end. And I think that from my experience with your organization, you all have achieved that beautifully. So thank you.
Natasha Vita-More, thank you for joining us on this interview on A Life of More. Such a pleasure.
Thank you.